large part of the prosecution's case dealt with these prior bad acts, these allegations that Michael Jackson abused other little boys back in the early 90s. And I want to bring back in Diane Dimond to talk about how the judge dealt with all this during the jury instructions dealing with these prior bad acts, the 1108 evidence of the state.
Well, you know, these readings of the jury instructions go on and on. This jury has the luxury of having them right in front of them so they could follow along. But simply put, what the judge told them about the 1108, the past bad acts evidence, he said, you can take that and make it a part of your decision as to whether or not you think that this man has a predilection to be a predator. It cannot, and even if you think he committed a crime in the past, you must keep it separate. You have to only use it if you think it goes to his propensity to have committed this crime. So, you know, if you think he did that crime, but you don't think he did this crime, the one that we're in here for now, then you have to acquit him, find him innocent of this crime. It was kind of complicated, but again, they have it right in front of them, so it's pretty easy for them, you know, to react to it or go back and reread it. I should tell you one more thing. These jurors keep notebooks, and I maybe shouldn't admit this, but I got the courtroom artist to use her binoculars so we could count how many each individual juror kept, how many notebooks. There were at least 4 of them that have a huge stack of notebooks. One man has at least 10, another one had 10, one had 8, one had 9. I was very stunned to hear the judge say today, here are your jury instructions. Now you have to leave them with your notebooks when you leave at night, but after this is all done, I'll let you take it all home. Now, I have never heard of a judge allowing people to take home their notebooks. I just kept thinking, okay, how many books on the Michael Jackson trial are we going to see now?
No kidding, because that didn't happen in the Peterson case. And let's go to one of my favorite California lawyers, Dean Johnson. I want to get what about the jury? How do you think they are receiving, say, Ron Zonen? Do you think this was a good decision to have him be the one to deliver that closing?
Yeah, I do. I really do. I've seen them respond to him in a very positive way. They pay attention to what he's saying. And I don't want to shirk Tom Mesereau. He came in here looking confident the way he always does, too, with his right-hand person, Susan Yu. They both smiled and waved. You know, all the fans standing out here not only cheer for Michael Jackson, but they cheer for his defense team. They have a sort of football chant they do, defense, defense. So they got that again today.
That's so sweet.
One more thing I should tell you, Michael Jackson actually looks a little more animated in court today. He wasn't sitting exactly straight like this staring at the court reporter wall. He actually turned in his chair. You know, he's still got that back pillow, that brace sort of thing that he has back there, but he was actually looking directly at the jury today, and that was a first.
All right, Dean Johnson, quickly before we have to go, what's
Hello, I'm Lisa Bloom, in for Catherine Cryer, who was on assignment this week. Well, the end is near in the Michael Jackson case. Closing arguments begin first thing tomorrow morning. Court TV's chief investigative editor Diane Dimond and correspondent Savannah Guthrie are ready and waiting. Diane, first question to you. The judge has been reading those important jury instructions to the panel. What are the highlights?
Well, it's just over, I should tell you, and I believe Michael Jackson is just about to leave the compound. The highlights were instructions on things like the 4 videotapes that they were shown here, the Martin Bashir video, the outtakes from that, the rebuttal video with this family, and of course that seemingly all-important Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department interview, first interview with the boy. He instructed the jurors that they should not take any of that for the truth of the matter, except for a few comments at the end of the Bashir documentary. The state wants that to go toward Michael Jackson making an admission. This is the part, Elisa, you know it so well, about milk and cookies, and it's perfectly natural to sleep with children in your bed. So that was one thing. Also, he instructed them, well, he instructed them on everything, but I'll hit the highlights. The believability of witnesses, and 2 important instructions there could go toward the mother in this case. He told them that they can can take the past criminal conduct of someone into account when they're thinking, gee, is this person believable or not, and whether or not they testified under a grant of immunity. There was another witness, Cindy Montgomery, a travel agent, who claimed the immunity as well. As for defendant not testifying, he told the jury, you may not make any inference from that. Don't let that factor into your decision in any way, shape, or form. And on conspiracy, I thought this was really interesting, Lisa. He said it's not necessary for a defendant himself or herself to have actually committed each act in a conspiracy, and we know we have 28 overt acts here. He said you must unanimously agree that there was a conspiracy, that this defendant was a member of the conspiracy, but there is no need to be unanimous as to which act this defendant may have done or agreed to, because one act done by any of the co-conspirators means everybody is guilty or responsible for all the acts.
Well, yes, and great point, Diane. That's one of the reasons why prosecutors like conspiracy charges, that and the fact they get to bring in a lot of hearsay evidence. And everyone has criticized this prosecution for bringing the conspiracy charge. But as you say, the standard of proof could be considered somewhat lower, really, than it is on other charges. Let me bring in Savannah Guthrie. She has been inside the courthouse, and she is just joining us. Savannah, how's Michael Jackson looking today?
You know, it's such an interesting reaction from Michael Jackson today, particularly after the instructions had been read to the jurors. As the jurors filed out, everybody stood up, as Michael Jackson does every day. But this time he was looking at that jury box, and he followed out those jurors as they walked out. You know, the attorneys around him had already kind of looked around and doing other things. Michael Jackson had a steady gaze on that jury box, and the expression on his face to me was grim, it was somber, it was deadly serious, and he watched every single juror file out of that courtroom.
What family members are there today, Savannah?
We've got Randy, we have the mother, we have the father, Catherine and Joe Jackson, and another brother, Tito Jackson today. All
right. Well, yesterday we told you about an explosive new article in the latest issue of Vanity Fair magazine. In it, special correspondent Maureen Orth stunned the world with a report that Michael Jackson believes that this trial is a conspiracy to gain control of his coveted Beatles catalog. Maureen Orth is here to explain now. She's also the author of The Importance of Being.
Tonight at 9, it's an all-new Forensic Files, followed by another mind-blowing episode of Forensic Files at 9:30. And at 10, it's Psychic Detectives.
We are back with some final thoughts on the case against Michael Jackson. Savannah Guthrie, straight out to you. I understand that Jackson's spokeswoman just spoke to the press. Catch us up.
She did. Raymond Bain actually confirmed what I just reported to you a few minutes ago, and that was that Michael Jackson was indeed upset today hearing the jury instructions. He looked it, you know, walking out of court, he looked very somber. And she said that he was upset to hear the reading of the charges and that he even felt some anger. You know, part of those charges were a rendition of the 28 overt acts of the indictment, which read like a story, a synopsis of the prosecution's case against Michael Jackson. And Diane Dimond has reported that the jurors were just sat up and took notice when those overt acts were read out. So, it's understandable how somebody in his position would start to really feel the pressure. One other note from the press conference, she says that Jackson's brothers and sisters, a larger presence of the family, will begin to come to court as soon as tomorrow for closing arguments. But there are only 6 seats, so they can't all pile in there.
And Savannah, we have a larger fan presence as well, right?
Absolutely. Record number of fans today, 200 people trying to get into about the 30, 35 or so seats into the courtroom, and a lot of the fans have stuck around today, and you just feel a total change in the energy and the atmosphere here. The tension is very high as we get close to deliberations in this case.
All right, Gloria Allred, let me
system, but he realizes that his fate lies in the hands of 12 people, and he's hoping that they'll look at the evidence and they will find him innocent of all of the charges.
You know, it's interesting. One of the reporters asked Raymond Bain, the spokesperson, if anybody had talked to Michael Jackson to try to prepare him in the event of a conviction about what jail would be like. And she said, you know what, he's an adult. I think he knows darn well what jail would be like. And obviously, it's all of these kinds of considerations that are leading to that increased nervousness and tension that's just apparent on his face.
And Savannah, you know, we will hear, of course, from the prosecution first. I always like to tell my juries that they hear from the prosecution first because the prosecution prosecution has the burden of proof, the defense does not, and then prosecutors get to speak again because they have that burden of proof. But while we're on the subject of the defendant in this case, is there any reporting on whether or not Mr. Mesereau is in contact with Jackson as he prepares, or as he prepared for today, and what may be part of tomorrow?
Well, what Raymond Bain said about that was that she does think that Michael Jackson talks to Tom Mesereau, that they speak often. You know, I think she stopped short of saying whether Michael Jackson was, you know, making suggestions about the closing argument. Raymond Bain has always suggested that Michael Jackson is very willing to defer to his defense team, that he has a lot of confidence in his defense team, but of course he's in regular contact and active in his own defense. But I don't think he's writing out a script, let's put it that way.
Well, Savannah, this is a very, very big day in the case. We're going to have you stand by throughout our special report while we bring in a couple of guests to take a look ahead at what is about to begin in San prosecution side of this case. Let's go out to Savannah Guthrie, who's outside that courthouse as we wait for Jackson and his family and others to arrive. You know, Savannah, we of course all noticed that Mr. Snedden is not doing the closing argument and that Mr. Zonin is, and you've described Zonin as surgical, which I think is just a terrific description of how he approaches a case. But one does have to wonder if jurors have noticed this subtle shift from Snedden to Zonin, and whether there's been any reporting on why the decision to have Zonin conduct the close.
Well, you know, there isn't. You know, we don't know. We can't get inside the prosecution team and know why it is that there's been this shift in strategy. But I can tell you that from people who have been watching this watching this trial day in and day out, it is universally regarded as a very wise decision. And that's not a slam on Tom Snedden or Gordon Auchincloss, who are very capable prosecutors. But it's clear that Ron Zonin has a ton of talent. He is able to really distill things in a very, very simple way. He's very quick on his feet. He's somebody who will be very good, I think, at responding to whatever arguments come up in the defense closing argument, and then he's fast on his feet. And so I think that it was a very good decision on the part of the prosecution team to put their, you know, their #1 player out there to give the closing argument. I think Ron Zonin will do a terrific job, as will, of course, Tom Mesereau. Everybody knows, you know, his skills are well documented.
Yeah, it's almost, you know, Tom Mesereau has to live up to the expectations. It reminds me of some of the presidential debates. The person who has to live up to the higher expectations sometimes falls short, and the guy who you think may not be such a superstar can turn out to be a superstar. So this is really going to be some day to watch. Let me ask Dean Johnson, who is a California criminal defense attorney and also was a prosecutor, whether you share Ted
orthodox, but if you don't want to believe her, look at the evidence that tends to corroborate the story that she's told. The travel reservations that were made to Brazil, the visa and the passport applications, the surveillance video that you saw, jurors, the conversations you heard between Frank Cassio Tyson telling the mother, you're in danger, it's not safe out there for you. I think the prosecution is going to have to lean hard on some of this corroborative evidence, because there's no question the accuser's mother was problematic on the stand.
Well, and Savannah, we are seeing now Michael Jackson arrive. We've been talking about the inside baseball of watching a trial. Well, the inside joke, I guess it is, amongst reporters or anchors like myself is who gets to do the arrival every day, and that has largely fallen on my desk, because I've been fortunate enough to be sitting here when Michael Jackson arrives every day. And now I have to say, as we only will have 1 or 2 days of this left, I would say it is something I'll miss a bit, seeing who arrives with him. He's got family members with him. Savannah, I don't know how good you are at identifying family members. I, of course, recognize his parents, and it looks like one brother.
Looks like Jermaine to me.
And
I think Michael Jackson, yeah, I think he looks pretty somber as he walks in, little slower than usual.
All right, while we watch Michael Jackson go into that courthouse, Dean Johnson, I know you have to leave us one final word of advice for Prosecutor Zonin, who we just saw arrive a few moments ago.
The same advice I gave to all the prosecutors I trained during my years in the DA's office. Keep it simple.
Oh, great advice, and it's good advice for me, too. So I'm going to say thank you very much, Dean Johnson. I know you have to get back in there to watch and prepare to watch these closing arguments. Thank you for joining us. And it is time to take a quick break. While we do, you can vote to separate the current accuser from the prior accuser, given the instructions and given the argument that Mr. Zonin is permitted under California law to make, that there is a propensity to commit this kind of act.
Yeah, this is very problematic evidence for the defense. where if that other evidence did not come in, I don't think there's too many people that wouldn't think this is a slam dunk for the defense and that they didn't carry the day. I mean, the grifter situation, all the money issues that are floating around this case. But when you have other people that are perhaps seemingly believable, and the judge is charging the jury that if you find that to have occurred, and the standard for finding if that occurred is a lower standard, just a preponderance of the evidence, that's just like making the scales a little bit higher, not reasonable doubt. And if you find that, you can use as a basis to find that the defendant had a propensity.
Closing arguments in Michael Jackson's case are now underway inside that Santa Maria courthouse, and soon Jackson's fate will be in the hands of his jury. Welcome back to Trial Heat and our special report on Michael Jackson's case. I'm Jamie Floyd. Joining us now with the very latest is Court TV's Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, just a little bit ago, the closing arguments started. How did they get going in that courtroom?
Well, I have a lot to tell you, Jamie. I'll tell you the prosecution started out by saying this is a case about the exploitation of and abuse of a child and about a mother who was trying to protect her kids from Michael Jackson and his employees who were trying to exploit and profit from those children. Ron Zonen said, I'm going to tell you, jurors, about the methods Michael Jackson used to seduce boys into his confidence, into his bedroom, and ultimately into his bed. He said this defense is limited to an attack on the mother, and I'm going to tell you why, how it's so easy to say that and how impossible it would have been to do it. He also said that Michael Jackson inserted himself into this family. He's the one that called the family. He's the one that beckoned them to Florida after the Bashir documentary, not the other way around.
Well, Savannah, if they're going to talk about the attack on the mother, they must then have to talk about the man who planned that strategy, Thomas Mesereau. Has Ron Zonen had anything to say about his colleague across the bar?
You bet. And in fact, I would say the first half hour of this closing argument really was designed around Tom Mesereau's opening statement. And you won't be surprised to know that he read the statement that Tom Mesereau made to jurors in opening statements when he said, I believe an opening statement is a contract. And if I don't make good on these promises, jurors, you should hold me accountable and judge me accordingly. And Ron Zonen said, let's begin to judge the statements. And then he went through a litany of statements that Tom Mesereau made in opening statements. For example, that George Lopez, Fritz Coleman, that Louise Palanker, Jay Leno all would say that the accuser's mother shook them down for money. He said, name one celebrity who came into this courtroom and told you that. There isn't any. He said the accuser's mother never asked Michael Jackson for a penny. He said over and over again, he would go through the evidence and then he'd say, either Tom Mesereau knew that or he should have known that, and you should judge him accordingly for the false statements he made.
Oh, boy. Well, we're going to get to that in just a second, but let's talk a little bit more about the substance of the argument that Mr. Zonen is making, in addition to bringing out Mesereau's opening statement and attacking some specifics in their strategy that we certainly want to break down. What about the actual allegations? Is he arguing with the jury that it's just a matter of common sense for them to find for the prosecution? How's he approaching it? Emotional or factual common sense?
Remember that word that we use, surgical, to describe Ron Zonen? I mean, he has a very calm demeanor. It's very matter of fact. And one of the things he is doing, as you say, Jamie, is appealing to the jurors' common sense. You know, he hasn't gotten to that portion of his argument where he really addresses the allegations that the accuser made. But as I left to come and talk to you, he was starting to get into it. And he started with that first story that the accuser said, that on his very first visit to Neverland, that he sat down with Michael Jackson, with Frank Cassio Tyson, one of Jackson's very close aides, and that they began surfing internet pornography. And remember that the accuser said that Jackson made some very off-color remarks. And that's when Ron Zonen said, jurors, use your common sense. If you think the accuser's mother sat down with her boys and told them to make up a story, do you think they would have put a witness there? And do you think that witness would have been someone so favorable to Michael Jackson, his closest aide? You know this story has the ring of truth.
Well, this is quite fascinating, Savannah, to see one attorney in a courtroom pretty much attack another attorney. And, you know, there are rules about that, but I guess no objection was made by Mr. Mesereau yet. And it is relatively unusual to see objections during closing argument. Ill-advised, in fact. Let me ask Ted Simon.
Well, it's not Hands Across America or We Are the World, but late last night, nearly 100 fans gathered outside Neverland Ranch to pray for pop star Michael Jackson. Welcome back to Both Sides in our special coverage of the Michael Jackson case. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle-Newsome along with Vinnie Politan. Well, day and night, Michael Jackson's fans are standing by him. Today, we have reported on Court TV that a record-breaking number of fans were at the courthouse trying to get seats in the courtroom for day one of closing arguments. Let's go right back outside that courthouse where our chief investigative editor, Diane Dimond, is standing by, getting updates from inside that courtroom. And Diane, it seems to me that all the fans are showing out in strong support for Michael Jackson. What's the atmosphere like out there?
Well, earlier this morning, it was really raucous when these 300 people showed up to try to get one of those 45 seats. It's since calmed down a bit because they realized Michael Jackson will be in there all day long. This morning, they were singing Michael Jackson songs, including the one that he wrote against the district attorney, Tom Sneddon. The name of the song is Dom Sheldon, but as he's singing it, it sounds like he's saying Tom Sneddon. Tom Sneddon is a cold man is the refrain, and they kept singing that over and over out here today. Inside, I should tell you, we were expecting to see some of the more famous members of the Jackson family, but when Michael Jackson arrived today, it was with his mom and dad again, his former manager, Frank DeLeo, and three of his brothers. The three brothers, Randy, Tito, and Jermaine, are sitting in the very front row. That's the one thing that the jury sees. They see Michael Jackson at the defense table, then these brothers, then behind them, his mother and father are there. Michael Jackson has made no emotion, no movement at all today. Like usual, he's just sitting stock still, looking up at Ron Zonen. Zonen, by the way, is not over at the prosecution table. He's at a lectern directly in front of the jury with one of those walk-around mics on. And after the break we took at 9:45 here, Ron Zonen came back and he looked at the jurors and he said, you know, I was worried. I had this on when I went to the men's room during the break, and I worried about it. I guess it was, you know, and they got a big laugh about that.
That's so funny.
It's a pretty tense feeling in the courtroom. No noise at all.
And Diane, how would you describe the performance of Ron Zonen? Is it dramatic? Is it commanding? Does it have like peaks and valleys of intensity? How is he presenting all this to the jury?
He is understated, forceful, folksy. He cracks a joke once in a while, but not a big joke. He makes a colloquial sort of phrase every once in a while that gets them to smile. He's a very comfortable person to listen to. I was watching the clock so I would get out here on time, and I realized how much time had gone by, and this man hardly looks down at a note. He is looking at these people in the jury box, and he's just saying, here's the story, folks. Use your common sense.
Yeah, that's what this case, I think, is all.
Michael, I'm there for you all the time, and I love you. People's gonna talk, but I still love you. Hope you do well.
Welcome back to Closing Arguments. I'm Nancy Grace. Let's go straight out to the courthouse, out of the courtroom. Joining us now, Diane Dimond. Hello, friend. Tell me about closing arguments.
Well, Tom Mesereau started at about 12:25. It was an inauspicious beginning, Nancy, I must say to you. The minute Ron Zonen quit, all eyes were on Tom Mesereau, of course. Zonen saved about an hour for his rebuttal closing. Tom Mesereau got up and left the room. What? We were all strangely puzzled. The jury got very restless, and we couldn't figure out where he had gone. About 7 minutes later, he returned to the courtroom with Susan Susan Yu, you know, they're very close. They work as a very close team. She bustled in with her computer, and it became clear that's where all of his graphics were. He needed Susan Yu in the courtroom. So they plugged in the computer, and it wouldn't work. They had to call in a couple of technicians. They were, you know, trying to look calm, but they were feverishly trying to get this thing to work. At one point, Susan Yu looked over at Michael Jackson and mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." But anyway, they finally got going a few minutes later, and Tom Mesereau, I must say, is delivering a powerful and energetic closing argument. It is all about attacking the integrity of this family, especially the integrity of the mother. He said point blank at the top, he said, "This is about whether the Doe family can be believed beyond a reasonable doubt. If anything they said or did puzzles you or you don't believe it, then you must acquit." He then went through a long rendition of all of what he termed were the mother's scams. J.C. Penney was up there. The welfare fraud was up there. He said, "Ask yourself, do I have any problem with anything they have said? If the answer is yes, then Mr. Jackson must go home." He talked a lot about the past testimony and promised that he would take them through transcripts. That hasn't occurred yet. He's sort of giving the outline at the top here. He said the testimony so far proves that this family are con artists, actors, and liars. The mother is so skilled with her tales of woe that people, just after hearing her tales of woe, simply decide to write her a check. She has committed perjury. I'll show you that in the J.C. Penney suit and in other times. You should pause and be suspicious about everything you have heard from every member of that family. It's clear that they were always trying to develop a lawsuit against Michael Jackson. Then he started talking about his client, seemingly poo-pooing the state's case against him. He said, "Look at him. He is a genius. He is concerned with going into the studio and creating and sitting in a tree and writing music. His only and biggest sin is that he trusted all the wrong people to be around him. He has been a target for years, ever since the 1994 payouts. There were two of them, as you remember, Nancy. He attacked Steve Robel, the lead detective in the case, on that very powerful video that the state ended its case on, the young boy first speaking to the police and telling them what he said happened with Michael Jackson. He said, you know, Mr. Robel from the very beginning said, you know, "Hi, come in, sit down, we're going to investigate. Michael Jackson's wrong, and you are right, and you're safe now," giving the clear implication that they really hadn't investigated anything, but they were going to make Michael Jackson a target. He asked a lot of questions to the jury, Nancy, rather than statements of fact. Look at Michael Jackson. Does he appear to be somebody who would enter into a conspiracy? Look at the mother and her past. Don't you think that? And then he would go into a long rendition. It was very unlike the presentation that Ron Zonen did earlier today, which really was sort of a story about the Doe family and how they got swept up in Michael Jackson's life.
To Ann Bremner, high-profile Seattle lawyer, also watching closing arguments. And what he is arguing, and I'm surprised there has not been an objection, is not the reasonable doubt standard by which this jury is to be held.
The same thing.
That is wrong. Zonen, get up and object.
I know. I was like, what are you doing in your chair? Get up. I mean, this whole, if you don't believe.
She's been inside the courthouse. Savannah, what's the very latest?
Well, court is done for the day. We're in a recess, but Tom Mesereau is nowhere near finishing his closing argument. And some of his final points really hit hard at the defense theory of this case, talking about how this family, in the defense's view, has a pattern of making up false claims. And he pointed to that J.C. Penney case, and he said, you know, at the beginning of that case, the accuser's mother told everybody, all I want is an apology. I don't want to file a lawsuit. And guess what she did? She filed a lawsuit. He said, so when she got on this stand and told you, I don't want any money, I don't want the devil's money, you can't believe her. He said, you have the power to make these people rich. They're just waiting. He also said earlier, everybody is looking for a big payday from Michael Jackson, and there's only one thing they need, a conviction from you. He also talked a lot about the pornography that was showed a lot through this trial, and he said, you know, let's talk about what was not found at Neverland. They never found any kiddie porn. They never had any allegation that there was photographs of young boys is shown to any of these alleged victims. And then they said, you know, they've dirtied up Michael Jackson because they don't want you to like him. They're afraid that you'll like him. They're afraid that you might admire him. They're afraid you might feel sorry for him and see him for the target that he is. And again and again, they went after the prosecutors, saying that they were desperate, that it was a rush to judgment, that they would do anything, and that the theory of the prosecution's case was win at all costs.
John Q. Kelly, you've won some big judgments, including the O.J. Simpson. I was listening closely to what you were saying, especially on the pornography point, because I think that pornography is so compelling for the prosecution, especially the many pictures in Michael Jackson's books of naked boys, genitals fully exposed. The point that you told us that Mesereau made, that Jackson didn't show those books or those pictures to any of the boys, that's an interesting point. And that is true, according to the testimony. None of the boys in this case say Jackson showed them those books, right?
That's right. If anything, it was the heterosexual porn. But, you know, Ron Zonin pointed out in his closing argument, if you're wondering why it is that Michael Jackson is showing heterosexual porn and not homosexual porn or kiddie porn, he says it's not for him. It's for the boys. It's to sexualize the boys. I want to tell you one other thing, Lisa. What Tom Mesereau is doing is literally putting transcripts up on that big screen and attacking some of the testimony, some of the conflicting statements that the accuser and some of the others have given. And in particular, he pointed out that in the accuser's testimony, he said that he was having a great time at Neverland and he didn't want to leave Neverland. And then he said, now remember back to that tape-recorded police interview that you saw. There, he said, I was scared. He said, watch his demeanor as he lies. You should look at that tape. Watch it as he lies. And, of course, we watch Michael Jackson as he leaves court this afternoon. That's a live picture.
Yes, and Savannah, as we watch that shot of Michael Jackson leaving today, flanked by his bodyguards, as he always is, the umbrella being held over him, his spokeswoman, Raymond Bain, behind him. How is he looking today? The reports yesterday was he was pretty nervous.
Well, I don't know, Lisa. You look at his face. I don't think he looks like a terribly happy person in there. He just looked straight ahead as these arguments unfolded this afternoon. Once again, second day in a row, I watched him really watch that jury file out today. You know, his lawyer went off. He was talking to somebody else. People turned around. You know, everybody's standing up. There's one person watching as Michael Jackson, as the jurors leave, and it's Michael Jackson. It's clear to me he wants to make a connection with those jurors, and Dick Gregory is among the people that Michael Jackson just walked out with.
I'm surprised that Mesereau let the spokeswoman say yesterday that Michael Jackson was nervous. Well, time for a quick break, but the panel is back on the other side. And still to come, they say blood is thicker than water, but is the Jackson family really standing by Michael? Well, we'll tell you a little later on. Stay with us.
On our Dish DVR.
I wish I had a Dish DVR.
Wearing some sort of device to help him sit up straight.
Well,
so
a couple more questions.
He needs
on
a good back doctor.
Well, he sure does. And you know, Diane, we spoke to Dick Gregory here at Court TV late on Friday. He told me a couple of things that really just astounded me. One was that Michael Jackson is living on carrot juice and celery juice, and that he's, frankly, other than that, just not eating. I have to wonder, is he anorexic? Is he intentionally trying to do himself harm by not eating? And when you tell me there are cardiopulmonary issues, we're talking heart and lungs, that's more serious than anything I've heard so far. I mean, is he wasting away before our eyes?
Well, he sure looks like it. I mean, when you compare what he looked like the day he jumped up on top of the vehicle and did...
Premiere of Trace.
Today in Santa Maria, California, day 2 of jury deliberations will soon get underway in Michael Jackson's child molestation case, while the singer recuperates at Neverland Ranch after yet another trip to the hospital yesterday. Welcome to Trial Heat and our special report on Michael Jackson's case. I'm Jack Ford.
And I'm Jamie Floyd. Thanks for joining us this morning. In just about a half an hour, the jury is expected to resume its deliberations inside that Santa Maria courthouse. The 8 women and 4 men spent just over 2 hours deliberating the singer's fate on Friday before they called it quits for the weekend. And as for Michael Jackson, he's home at Neverland Ranch, where he will wait until the jury reaches its verdict. But over the weekend, the pop star made another visit to the hospital. Joining us now from outside that Santa Maria, California courthouse is Court TV's Savannah Guthrie. I'm actually quite amazed Michael Jackson made it this far. It seems the stress is continuing to take its toll. What happened over the weekend?
Well, apparently he made 2 visits to the hospital. It's called Cottage Hospital. It's close to Neverland. Apparently he went there twice. And then we've also heard reports that there was a home health nurse or kind of home health person who visited Neverland. He spent a couple of hours in the hospital yesterday for a recurrent back problem, according to his spokeswoman. And, you know, this just sort of confirms what everybody can see when you look at the video, the recent video of Michael Jackson coming to court. This is somebody who is under an enormous amount of stress and pressure. And anybody who's had a back problem certainly knows that when you're under stress, that's almost the first thing to happen. Your back starts to flare up, and clearly he's you know, on pins and needles waiting for this verdict to come.
And of course it is all about Michael Jackson and his accuser in the end, but at the moment, Savannah, it's really all about the jury in this case, the 12 people who will make the ultimate decision about whether Michael Jackson returns to Neverland Ranch a free man or whether he goes off to prison for some period of time. Tell us who these people are. Give us an overview of the jury. This is really the first full day of jury deliberations, and a big day for that reason. Who are they?
Well, we have 8 women and 4 men on the jury. The average age is about 44 years old, but there's a range of ages. We have a young man who's 21 years old, a young mom who's 22 years old. You know, by the way, 8 of the 12 jurors are parents. 7 of those 8 are parents of boys. There are a couple of jurors who have young children. The young woman I just told you about, she's got little ones. I think it's 1-year-old and a 4-year-old. And then there's another juror who's got teenagers at home. But most of the jurors who have children, their children are grown now. They're adults and not necessarily living at home. Most of them are married. Many of them are divorced but remarried now. There was 1 African American on the alternate panel. There's about 4 Hispanics on this panel. Their average income in this area, the average cost of a home in this area is about $180,000, and there seem to be a range of incomes there, a range of education levels. Some people just have their high school diploma, a couple of graduate degrees there. Some people attended some college, people went to community college. So you've just got a range of you know, I guess it is a good cross-section of this community here in Santa Barbara County.
And we often talk about jury diversity in terms of race and ethnicity, but this jury seems to be quite diverse in other ways as well. Savannah, there's one juror in particular that interests me quite a bit. She's a woman who has some experience through family members with crimes like these, experience with the criminal justice system. Tell us a little bit about that juror.
This is such an interesting juror, you know, and it's so interesting that she ended up on this case. During voir dire, during the jury selection process, she revealed that when her sister was young, she was raped. Her sister was raped as a 12-year-old. Then later, her sister grew up and got involved in drinking and drugs, and according to this juror, was not a good mother to her 2 little girls. This juror's nieces were molested by their father, according to this juror, and this juror took them in. The mother later died. The father went to jail. When they actually tried to turn in, as soon as the young girls revealed this to this juror, she and her husband tried to turn him in. The second time they tried to do it, turns out he was already in jail on separate charges. So this is just somebody who has a terrible tragedy in her life, but she insisted during jury selection that this would not affect her ability to look at this case impartially, and she wound up on the final jury panel.
Can you say peremptory challenge Jack Ford? I don't know how this juror gets on the jury.
You know what, if you look at the bio there, you would think that the defense attorneys would have to be saying, even if she truly believes, and there's no reason not to.
Well, yes and no. You know, you're tempted to think the people that sit together are friendly because I guess they're forced to sit there, right? There is a young man who's in a wheelchair, and one thing I have noticed, because sometimes I do see the jurors, you know, as they pull in their cars in the morning, and it seems to me that I see other jurors kind of helping him out a little bit, and it seemed to me that some of the jurors were a little bit protective of him and kept their eye out for him as he came into court. There are a couple of women sitting in the front row, actually on the alternate panel, that seem to whisper a lot, so they seem to be the whisper twins. friends and like to make little asides to each other, or I'd catch them passing notes, that kind of thing. You know, for the most part, we don't see the jurors. So as I say, it's like we kind of think that they're all hanging out with the people they happen to sit next to. But one thing I did notice is that when the jurors would file in and assume their seats, they didn't necessarily, you know, they came in different order. So one person would have to step over the other to get to the other. So that would suggest to me that they are hanging out in varying groups when they're not sitting there in the courtroom.
Hey, Savannah, just a moment ago while you were talking, we were seeing shots of the notebooks that the jurors are using. Again, some of them taking more notes than others, some of them taking more notes for certain witnesses than others?
Absolutely. I mean, by and large, I would say this is a note-taking jury. These people take a lot of notes, and you know they're the same as my notepad. And some of them, by the end of trial, just like us, had stacks of them. And they'd also go back. Sometimes I'd see jurors looking back at their notes, almost to check and oh, what did I hear from this other witness? And so they're very conscientious. Now, of course, some jurors take fewer notes than others. Some of the older jurors, I didn't think took as many notes. But by and large, I would say this is a jury that likes to take a lot of notes.
Jamie, I'm going to ask you this because I've always sort of wrestled with this. When you were trying cases, did you like having jurors taking notes during a trial?
No, I'm a defense attorney, Jack. The fewer notes, the better. It's all about the gut feel. Welcome back to Court TV's Both Sides. We're going to switch gears here for a second, go live straight out to Santa Maria, California, where Savannah Guthrie is standing by with an update.
Now they don't know.
Hi there, Kimberly. Well, let me just first tell you, it's not a verdict, but we've had some excitement here today. Joe Jackson, Michael Jackson's father, just came to the courthouse totally unannounced, without any bodyguards, any entourage, comes to the front of the street where the fans all congregate and started to walk towards the courthouse. He immediately was mobbed by the crush of photographers as well as fans. It was this whole circle of people walking as he tried to make his way to the courthouse. The fans started chanting, "Innocent, innocent." Some of this happened right by where the jurors deliberate inside this courthouse. He sort of slowly made his way, mobbed as he was, inside the courthouse, where I believe he now is. Now, I should tell you, Tom Mesereau and Susan Yu are in the courthouse right now, so I guess it's possible he's meeting with them. We thought for a moment it was possible he wanted to say something to the media and would come to the podium, but so far we haven't heard anything from Joe Jackson. But a very strange chain of events here, as he just walks in with no bodyguards, nobody, just walked in and was immediately mobbed by the fans and the press.
Did you see, Savannah, whether or not he drove himself or whether or not his wife was waiting in the car or anything like that?
No, I didn't. You know, we asked that, and our cameraman was right there, and he said all of a sudden he just looked up, and there was Joe Jackson, as I say, right on the street. And just to kind of give you the lay of the land, when Joe Jackson comes to court every day with his son, Michael Jackson, they're not out on the public street. There's kind of a driveway that's fenced off from the public street. He didn't come there. He came out to where the public street is, where the fans congregate, and then kind of made a way on the sidewalk. And as I say, as he did, you know, more and more photographers, more and more fans just gathered all around him, and he had a hard time walking.
And there we have a shot of this as it occurred, I guess. Savannah, you see that?
Mr. Jackson. Mr. Jackson, just a short question.
And there you see Joe Jackson, the father of Michael Jackson, as he comes to court. Seems a little bit of a melee there. I'm not sure that that was advisable to come without the security, and we're not sure exactly, Savannah, what was the purpose for him arriving like that. Is that right?
Right. We don't know why he's here, except to speculate that Tom Mesereau is in the courthouse, as is Susan Yu, his chief deputy. So perhaps they're having some kind of a meeting. Perhaps he wanted to have an audience with Tom Mesereau. Perhaps he has something he wants to tell Tom Mesereau and wants to do it in person. I don't know. It's, you know, clearly quite unexpected to have him come in this way, and I don't think he'll be trying that again. As you can see, he couldn't walk. In that shot, he doesn't know where to go because the fans and the media are completely crushed around him.
Definitely a mob scene over there at that. All right, Savannah, we'll be staying in touch with you for any updates. Let us know if any other new developments with that arrival of Joe Jackson out in Santa Maria, California. In the meantime, we're going to switch gears back to Florida.
Hello, I'm Monica Pergament with the latest from the Court TV News Center. The father of Michael Jackson arrived at court today without his son and was mobbed by fans as jurors resumed their deliberations in the child molestation trial. Joining us now live from the Santa Maria Courthouse is Court TV correspondent Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, what's the latest?
Well, I have a little more information to tell you, Annika. We now know that when Joe Jackson came here, he walked straight up to a sheriff's deputy and said, "Where is my son? I want to see my son. Where is Michael?" And the sheriff's deputy says that he said, "You know, he's not here, sir. I'm sorry. I can't help you." At that point, you know, he was being mobbed by not only news photographers, but also fans who are here holding a vigil of sorts. And they sort of said 1, 2, 3 and started chanting, "Michael is innocent. He's innocent. He's innocent." I have to tell you, Annika, this took place just a few feet from where the jurors are deliberating. There is a kind of a partition set up, but it's just a screen, really, a green screen. And then there's a patio, and then there is the room in which the jurors are deliberating. You can see from the video that Joe Jackson was literally mobbed and had a hard time making his way. From that point, he went around to the back of the courthouse, at which point he was let into the courthouse by sheriff's deputies. Tom Mesereau happens to be inside the courthouse right now, as is Susan Yu, his deputy, so presumably they may be meeting, trying to figure out what to do. I can't stress enough how irregular this is. Joe Jackson came by himself, no entourage, no bodyguards. He appears to have been dropped off on the public street. He got out and started almost stomping, walking resolutely toward the courthouse. And as I've been telling you, went up to a sheriff's deputy and asked to see his son. "Where is my son?" Some of the photographers who were there have told me he seemed agitated, he seemed upset, it seemed sad. I can also tell you that some of the sheriff's deputies are frankly very disturbed that this took place. Some of them feel it may have been a stunt to have all of the fans start chanting so close to the jury deliberation room. He's still in there, by the way, so I don't know what they're going to do to get him out of here. Of course, all efforts will be made not to repeat the scene on the way in, but that is the very latest from Santa Maria right now.
Now, you said, Savannah, he's been asking where was his son. He was told that Michael wasn't there yet. We know that Michael was rushed to the emergency room again this weekend in the hospital. What's the latest on his health?
Well, the fact of the matter is, Annika, Michael is not here, and he will not be here unless the jurors reach a verdict. He's been told that he can stay at Neverland and that there will be an hour lead time. In the case that there's a verdict announced, it'll be an hour before they actually read it in open court. So he'll be at Neverland. He's not here, and everybody knows that, including Joe Jackson. So that just lends to the strangeness of this whole event. Now, as to his health, Michael Jackson did go to the hospital twice, actually, this weekend, complaining of this recurrent back problem. There's no question in looking at Michael Jackson in these last few days that he seems to be a man under some kind of physical distress, and certainly one can imagine the emotional stress and toll this whole trial, not to mention the deliberations, are taking on him. So we understand that he's back at Neverland. I can also tell you that a home health nurse or some kind of home health aide also was seen going into Neverland on Saturday. So clearly he's got a lot of problems. Clearly people around him are concerned about his health, concerned that he's not eating. He's gotten painfully thin. So just a lot of people are very worried about Michael Jackson, and he is at Neverland waiting out this verdict.
Switch gears for a minute, Savannah. Tell us a little bit about the jury. As you said, they have been deliberating while this mob scene was going on outside surrounding Joe Jackson. Tell us about this jury, their makeup, and so forth.
Well, we have 8 women and 4 men on this jury. Their average age is about 44, but you really have a range. I mean, you have a couple of people who, a 21-year-old college student, a 22-year-old mom. We've got some ladies in their 40s, a math teacher, a couple of retirees, a 79-year-old widow. So they really run the gamut as far as occupations and age. The racial makeup of the jury is about 4 Hispanics. The rest are white. 8 of the jurors are parents, 6 of them are mothers, and 7 of the 8 parents are parents of boys. But most of the jurors, I would say, their children are grown now, though we have a young mother. She's got little ones, a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, and then another juror has a couple of teenagers. So in any event, it's a diverse jury with a lot on its table as it deliberates this 10-count indictment against Michael Jackson.
All right, Savannah Guthrie reporting live for us from Santa Maria. Thank you so much for that update. We will, of course, have special reports today at 2 o'clock and at 3:30. Of course, we'll bring you coverage of the verdict live as soon as it happens.
2 visits to the hospital. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I can tell you what his spokeswoman says, which is that they were to treat a recurrent back problem. He also had some kind of home health person visit Neverland on Saturday. Then he made a visit, we hear, to the hospital on Saturday night, and then again on Sunday spent a few hours there because of this back problem. And then, as you say, on Thursday, last Thursday after court, on the advice of Dick Gregory, his friend and the civil rights activist, he went to the hospital to get, fluids, electrolytes, dehydration treatment, and that was why why he was there. And there's no question, I mean, you can just look at him and compare him to really the beginning of the trial to now. There's no question he's under a tremendous amount of strain. It's written all over his face, all over his body. He is astonishingly thin. I've told you a couple of times that in the courtroom, you know, we look at the back of him and you can see his shoulder blades just protruding out of his blazer. He's just a wisp. He's extremely thin, and I think everyone around him who cares about him is very worried.
All right, well, Ramon Bain was making those reports to Michael Jackson drinking carrot juice and things like
somebody else out of the church. Oh, this is a live shot, everybody. Reverend Jesse Jackson approaching a podium, I'm sure. So what's this all about, Art Harris? Jesse Jackson showing up.
Jesse Jackson is someone who is like a moth to the flame of publicity. I'm sure that he is in his heart sincere in wanting to help Michael Jackson, but he is quite an orator. As you know, Nancy, I covered the South for the Washington Post and followed him around voting rights drives, and when he shows up, the crowds show up, but usually it's the crowds before Jesse. I'm sure we will be very interested to hear what he has to say about Michael and his status, and he is someone who, you know, has been at the heart of just about every major controversy and headline over the last 2 decades. So
have you ever heard this guy preach? Have you ever heard this guy preach? He can lay a preaching on you like you've never heard before.
He's got it. He's got the touch.
He has it. But I'll tell you what, I'm still hung up, Dr. Robbie Ludwig. This is a live shot of Reverend Jesse Jackson. He says he's come, I think, to pray with Michael Jackson. I'm still hung up. And I interviewed him about this over on Headline News. He said, Michael Jackson called into his radio show that they have on weekends, right, Diane?
Yes, he sure did.
And described how he just didn't want to eat, and he had to have Elizabeth Taylor feed him.
Yeah.
Spoon feed him. And the thought of a 40-something-year-old man getting spoon-fed, I don't know.
Michael Jackson is a very, very sick man, and I think among other disorders, he has an obsessive-compulsive disorder.
He is running a financial empire.
You know what, Nancy? There are people...
And he's got to have Elizabeth Taylor spoon-feed him some tapioca? Are you kidding me?
I'll tell you something. There are people... You know, it would not... He has a body dysmorphic disorder. Look at his face, Nancy.
What?
Body dysmorphic disorder is when somebody looks in the mirror and they see a very distorted version of themselves. And these are the people that enter and go to a plastic surgeon over and over and over again. So it's very possible he may have some underlying eating disorder issues as well.
You know what? Diane, help me out here. You know what I think it is? I think it's a case of the brats. I'm not getting my way. I'm not going to eat. And have somebody spoon feed him. It's not like he spit the food out after Elizabeth Taylor spoon fed him. So, I mean, have you seen a difference in his body shape?
Oh, I absolutely do. I don't know. I remembered at his mugshot, the day that his mugshot was released, said he weighed 120 pounds. Someone who is close to the Jackson family, is on Neverland Ranch quite a bit, told me that he is now about 90 pounds. I don't know that that might not be an exaggeration, but he does look completely different. You know, much like I knew an anorexic young woman who began to look so bad like that, the knobby knees, the skin hanging off of her elbows, and of course we never see him in a sleeveless shirt, but it looks like Reverend Jesse Jackson is standing right by the door where Michael Jackson went in every day, and it looks as though he's starting to speak. Nancy.
Let's take a quick listen to Jackson.
This is off. I can. I've talked with Michael consistently throughout this ordeal, trying to fortify his faith and his confidence, because he's been beleaguered by so many attacks. We met on yesterday, and Michael was really in excruciating pain, a kind of writhing pain. From the time he had the fall some time back, and then a second fall in the shower, he's had these constant back spasms. And so yesterday he sought some relief. As we talked last night, he was grimacing in pain. On the other hand, he is so strong and so resilient. He's very focused. He's very clear. In the most private moments to class, his sense of innocence. At one level, we see Michael as this small guy of stature, but who has this amazing strength, and he is aware of the seriousness of this hour, and he's at a real crossroads as to whether he'll be acquitted or whether he will be imprisoned. He is convinced that the jury will be responsible. He has faith in the jury, and that if reasonable doubt is the standard, he'll be acquitted. I think at some level Michael feels a sense of betrayal by those who he trusted the most, who in some sense turned on him. He feels, I think, even a greater sense of injustice toward the role of the sheriff and then the DA in such extraordinary efforts to destroy him. After all, when the sheriff went into Neverland in the Waco style, 75 armed deputies as if they were expecting armed resistance, went in and destroyed furniture and art and property and took away personal items, came out of the place with under occupation, then had this international press conference declaring Michael to be guilty, looking for more witnesses. At some point in time, the DA made the charges, and the judge has been quite generous toward the sheriff and the DA. But through all of that, Michael remains very focused, and I'm convinced.
Okay, Jesse Jackson speaking out for Michael Jackson, who of course did not take the stand and subject himself to cross-examination.
Yes, I did see it. Are you talking about the video of the accuser's first interview with police? Correct. In the rebuttal case?
Correct.
Yes, I did see it. Well, it was one powerful piece of evidence, Catherine.
Tell me about it.
Well, it's an hour-long interview with the accuser. For the one thing I noticed right off the bat is how much younger he looks than the person we saw on the stand. He's 15 when he came and testified, but just 13 at this time, and he seems to have more of a baby face. Throughout the entire video, I don't think his voice ever rises above a mumble or a whisper. The first part of the tape is really a get-to-know-you part. You can see that the officers are trying to make him feel comfortable and kind of, asking just sort of get-to-know-you questions. Then about halfway through, they began to ask if Michael Jackson ever touched him inappropriately. The boy hesitates for a long while before answering yes. He sighs, he sort of shifts in his seat, seems uncomfortable. They ask the follow-up questions. He gives a little, for example, he'll say, he grabbed me. And then a long silence will go on, and then the officers will say, where? It really struck me, Catherine, that these were officers who were trying to pull this story out of him. He didn't seem like he was anxious to blurt it out.
And the notion that he had taken acting lessons as a kid, do you think that the jury would ignore that sort of remark? Because I can't imagine a 12 or 13-year-old acting his way through an interview with the cops.
Well, and that's exactly what the prosecutor said in closing arguments. The notion that an acting class when you're a little kid could help you produce that kind of performance on a tape is really nonsensical. On the other hand, jurors saw this accuser in another rebuttal video, the one that they did supposedly for the Jackson Take Two video, where the boy does speak very eloquently in some parts of it about how much he loves Michael Jackson and how he helped him with his cancer and all this kind of stuff. And when he was on the stand, Tom Mesereau asked him point blank, was that a lie? And he said, yeah, I was acting. And I remember thinking at that time, this kid can act. So if jurors, if they remember that, maybe they'll think this is an acting job. I got to tell you, if it is, it's a very good one.
All right, quick break. We've got a lot more on the other side.
Amanda Grove with the latest from the Court TV News Center. Michael Jackson expects to be acquitted in his child molestation trial. So says the Reverend Jesse Jackson, a spiritual advisor for the singer who spoke about the case.
And he is aware of the seriousness of this hour, and he's at a real crossroads as to whether he'll be acquitted or whether he will be imprisoned. He is convinced that the jury will be responsible. He has faith in the jury, and that if reasonable doubt is the standard, he'll be acquitted.
Jurors go back to work deliberating this morning at this hour. Joining us now live from the Santa Maria Courthouse is Court TV correspondent Savannah Guthrie. Good morning, Savannah. What's the latest?
Good morning. Well, good morning, Amanda. The jury is here now for the third day of deliberations, but it's really the second full day. Yesterday, of course, a full day of deliberations, but no verdict from this jury. I can tell you the jury arrived about 20 minutes ago in the bus that it's now being transported in. You know, during the trial, the jurors could come in driving their own cars. Not so anymore. They're meeting at an undisclosed location and then are being brought here to the courthouse for their deliberations, which have now started. As you know, here in Santa Maria, they don't have lunch breaks. They take 3 10-minute breaks per day, but we're not being told if they're taking those breaks, what they're eating. We're really not being told much of all about what's happening in the deliberation room, even those mundane details, but I can tell you they're hard at work this morning.
Savannah, the jury had a question yesterday. The judge wouldn't release it, wouldn't say anything. Do we know anything about it?
Unfortunately, no, Amanda, and I think that may be the case throughout these deliberations. The note came in about 10 till 10 a.m. here on the West Coast. Both lawyers were consulted. Presumably the matter was resolved, and that was that. The judge is not releasing the contents of the notes. That's his bottom line, although a media attorney who represents some of the news organizations here has filed a petition with the court to ask him to release these things, to have them made public. One thing that is being widely reported this morning, Amanda, is that the foreperson on this jury is juror number 2. Let me quickly tell you about him. He's a 63-year-old Hispanic male. He has a graduate degree. On his jury questionnaire, he checked that he was both retired and unemployed and looking for work. His wife is a freelance accountant. His ex-wife is a teacher's aide. He's somebody who's very distinguished looking. As I said, he's about in his 60s. He would wear really beautiful Western suits during some of the jury selection process. And as I say, many people are reporting that he is the foreperson of this jury.
That's interesting, Savannah. Western suit. Describe that. What do you mean by that?
Just kind of old West, just, you know, I guess traditional Western wear. In fact, he seems to like Western art. He's somebody who's from this area, so I don't know.
Okay.
I need to get my thesaurus out, Amanda, to really describe it.
Kind of like
traditional Western.
I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wasn't sure what you meant.
But he didn't wear that every day to court, I have to tell you.
Okay. Speaking about jurors, tell us about a controversy concerning a juror and a reported book deal.
Yes. Now, this we've been hearing about for about a week or so. The juror number 5, who is the 79-year-old widow, the grandmother, apparently has a granddaughter who's in the literary industry. This is a woman who reportedly has been wanting to write the story of her life for many, many years, and now thinks, I guess, how much better would that story be now that she's a juror on the Jackson trial. And the word is that she has some sort of arrangement with a publisher to publish a book. But her granddaughter, who's been speaking in the press a little bit, is adamant that they have not talked about the substance of the case or how the grandmother feels about the case, but that they have chosen a publisher and an author. Now, Judge Melville apparently is aware of this. It was discussed among the attorneys, and apparently neither side objected to this juror remaining on the jury, and she's in there deliberating as we speak.
Very interesting. And Savannah, kind of some...
They're not. Tell us why not, and what the arrangements are for getting the jury back and forth to the courthouse.
Yeah, they're not sequestered, and what I'm told is that it is highly unusual for a jury to be sequestered in this county. Presumably neither side asked for it. It's not Judge Melville's practice. Keep in mind that if the jury had been sequestered, they're getting off work here at 2:30 Pacific time, which would give them the entire afternoon and evening, I guess, just cooling their jets at a hotel. I can also tell you that most of the local hotels are completely booked up with media. So I don't know if it's for practical considerations, could be expense. The Santa Barbara County budget is extremely tight. That's why the jurors aren't working full days. They're stopping at 2:30 because, frankly, there's an expense associated with keeping them here as far as court staff and overtime, things like that. What they have done that's different, though, is instead of the jurors driving themselves now to court, as they had throughout the trial, they're meeting at an undisclosed location somewhere in this area, parking there, and then a bus is bringing them in the morning. And this morning we were able to shoot part of that. Of course, we're not permitted to shoot the jurors, but we could show them getting in on the vans. There you see them coming in 2 vans and filing in to deliberate. That happened about 8:15 local time this morning. Many of the jurors, by the way, were wearing jeans. And you know, Jack, the old conventional wisdom. This is what we're left to during Verdict Watch. People think if the jurors dress up, maybe they're giving a verdict that day. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what people say. And they were wearing jeans today, most of them.
It's funny, you do hear, as you know, from your own practice and from covering these trials, there are all sorts of theories out there about reading the tea leaves as to when a jury may well be coming back and what their decisions are going to be. And as you said, we never really. And the judge allowed him to tell his story to the jury in this case. Welcome back to Trial Heat and our special report on Michael Jackson's case. I'm Jack Ford. Jamie Floyd has the day off today. Now, over the course of several days, jurors heard testimony about Michael Jackson being a child molester, but the testimony had nothing to do with the accuser in this case. Prosecutors are hoping that this evidence of Jackson's alleged prior bad acts will tip the scale in their favor and lead to Jackson's conviction in this case. Court TV's Diane Diamond has this report.
Prosecutors presented a string of witnesses who testified about Jackson's alleged prior bad acts with other young boys, all of which allegedly happened years before meeting the current accuser. Some of the most damaging testimony appeared to relate to Jackson's 1993 accuser. Jordan Chandler's mother testified about the time she told her son he couldn't sleep with Michael Jackson. Question: could you describe for the jury Mr. Jackson's demeanor at the time that they came back to the room? Answer: he was sobbing, he was crying, shaking, trembling. Question: tell the jury what he said. Answer: he said, "You don't trust me? We're a family. Why are you doing this? Why are you not allowing Jordy to be with me?" And Michael was trembling and saying, "We're a family. Jordy is having fun. Why can't he sleep in my bed? There's nothing wrong. There's nothing going on. Don't you trust me?" Also, Jackson's former security guard, Ralph Chacon, described an intimate moment he says he witnessed between Jackson and young Chandler. "I saw that Mr. Jackson was caressing the boy's hair. He was kissing him on his head and his face, his lips. He started kissing him on the shoulders and started going down to his nipples, started sucking his nipples, started going down to his penis and putting it in his mouth." Adrian McManus, a former Neverland maid, testified about another encounter between Jackson and Chandler. "I saw Mr. Jackson with Jordy, and they were changing their clothes. Like, I figured they were at the water fort, and I looked down and I saw Mr. Jackson kissing on Jordy." Question: what part? Answer: his cheek, and then his mouth, and his hand was on his crotch. Another former maid testified about seeing Jackson in the shower with then 8-year-old Wade Robson. "I came in and first I thought that they were playing in the bathtub, jacuzzi, and I didn't see them. And then I thought they were outside, playing outside the house, I mean in his garden. And I walked and they were in the shower." Question: what clothing did you see on the floor? Answer: underwear. Question: how many pairs did you see? Answer: 2. Adrian McManus testified about Jackson's alleged inappropriate behavior with 2 more young boys, Brett Barnes and Macaulay Culkin. "I kind of looked over the landing and he," meaning Jackson, "was walking away with Brett to his room, and I saw him put his hand on Brett's rear end and he gave Brett a kiss on the cheek." She also said, "I saw Mr. Jackson and Macaulay in the library, and Mr. Jackson was kissing him on his cheek, and he had his hand kind of by his leg, kind of on his rear end." Jackson's former chef also testified about Culkin and Jackson. "Michael was playing with Macaulay Culkin at one of the games, and he was holding the kid because the kid was small, couldn't reach the controls, so I guess he was holding him with 2 hands. Question: and what did you see that upset you? Answer: his left hand was inside the pants of the kid." Jurors also heard firsthand from another witness who described Jackson sexually assaulting him beginning at the age of 7. "He reached up and to my privates, yeah." Question: did he actually touch your... Answer: yeah. Question: touch you? Yeah. Did he touch your penis or your testicles? I think option 2, yeah.
So then a number of those witnesses testifying in this trial against Michael Jackson, offering up the testimony that Diane just told you about. Let's go back out to Savannah Guthrie outside of the courthouse there in Santa Maria, California. Savannah, what did the judge say to the jurors when he instructed them about just how they could use that testimony in their deliberations in this case?
Well, essentially what he told them is if you believe that Michael Jackson committed these prior sexual offenses, then it is a reasonable inference that he has a predisposition to commit sexual offenses. You may, but are not required to infer that he has a propensity to commit sexual offenses, thereby turning over, many, many years of jurisprudence in this country that basically says, we try people for what they did, not who they are. 1108, prior sex offenses evidence, turns all of that on its head and tells the jurors, no, you can make some presumptions about who this person is based on this evidence if you believe it.
We have another guest who's spending some time with us this afternoon, and we're up.
1 for the money, 2 for the lust, 3 to get hustled.
Opinions about his innocence or guilt are being discussed. So there's no conflict between those of us who really support the brilliant case put forth by the defense and trusting the jury. On the other hand, if Michael's friends did not stand in support of him in the public way, one would ask, where are they? Because he had so many friends when he was on the high side with the tailwind blowing behind his back. So there really is no conflict. On the one hand, there have been those who suggested that Michael was faking injury. Michael is really hurt, he had a very severe back injury, and then compounded by the fall in the shower. And he has periodic back spasms. No doubt stress is a factor in the spasms, but he's resting comfortably and he's at home. On the other hand, there's been the pressure of this trial, and he realizes the gravity of the trial and its implications. It takes a lot of pressure to look at those that he was most generous toward, testified to destroy him. And yet, because of the brilliant cross-examination by Tom Mesereau, it seemed that all of those who testified against him withered or wilted in the face of the cross-examination, always with some money motive. But Michael's confidence in the jury and the process, the makeup of the jury, his lawyers remains very strong. Those who support Michael support that process. Michael asked me to come be with him several times during this period. I just couldn't physically make it because of my own schedule, but I chose at this time, since he called, I suppose, Friday, to come and be with him this weekend and to pray with him and help fortify his faith and his confidence as he is in this crisis moment. In some sense, the jury has the fate, and Michael must have the faith in God and confidence in himself. So we've kind of operated in that way.
One follow-up question. Are you staying at Neverland?
No, I'm staying in the city at the fabulous greenery of Holiday Inn.
Reverend, what do you say to Deborah Opry, who's been critical of you in the media, that your presence is negative? What's your response to it?
I shouldn't. I'm here as Michael's guest at his behest, and supportive of what she does, and supportive of what the lawyer has done. But there is an environment here that we must always be aware of. When the sheriff, last November, I suppose, invaded, occupied his home and confiscated materials, and came out and had the big press conference for the media, shared with media confiscated materials, declared Michael to be guilty. Helps to trigger the investigation by the district attorney, asking for more witnesses. And even now, showing people the jail cell he expects Michael to sleep in. So there is a context in which all of this is taking place. The DA has made his strongest moves as prosecutor. The judge has been quite generous, giving them access to virtually every request that they made. But to all of this, Michael remains amazingly optimistic. A, declaring his own innocence. B, confidence in the jury and its integrity and credibility. and as well as confidence in his own lawyers. So that's a kind of dual process here, and we hope that somehow that both the internal legal arguments and public support will be a factor in Michael's acquittal. Michael is very well embraced through all of this by his supporters throughout the world. He must not be made to feel alone or abandoned.
Can you tell us?
You are next.
Okay.
Yes.
Reverend, can you please tell us, since you have had contact with Michael, something that he has told you from his own lips, and can you tell us how he is passing these days? What he's physically doing? Is he bedridden or?
He's bedridden by night and he walks by day, like the rest of us do. He does have the back problem, and we talked, I suppose Sunday night, he was grimacing in pain. So for those, it is painful to him to hear people suggest that this is fake. His pain is real. He has been bruised. He's been injured, and it hurts. He has these back spasms, and so he is not faking or being political in any way about his visits to the hospital, to the doctor. And second, I don't know that. I do know that he is has a very strong constitution. Now, Michael has become the world's top entertainer because Michael is not only a creative genius, but Michael has intestinal fortitude, and Michael is tough. Michael is a champion, and the ground is no place for a champion. Champions fight back, and Michael is fighting back with all of the fervor that we saw in his creativity as an artist. But what is amazing to me about it, he does so with a degree of positiveness. That is, in his talks, no bitterness and no anger, and this abiding confidence in the judicial process. I think he's learned something that he never knew before. I mean, he's only known sheriffs to be escorting him to concerts. Now you see sheriffs in a different light. Sheriffs and district attorneys and prosecutors and juries and judges. This is a different scene, and yet he is handling it with great aplomb and professionalism. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask you about people like Elizabeth Taylor and Oprah Winfrey and the people who were in support of Michael Jackson in 1993 and were standing up there and were behind him, went to Neverland, and they don't seem to be here. They don't seem to have come forward in the media. They're not here around Michael. Can you address that?
I can't, because I do not know their schedules, nor do I have their numbers.
Why haven't any of the public figures, other than yourself, come forward to say, look, I believe in Michael Jackson's innocence, you know, I stand behind Michael? Why?
You should call them and ask them.
We'll bring it back.
I'm wondering if you think that if Michael feels that he got a fair trial here.
At this point, Michael continues to express confidence in the judicial process. Obviously, the behavior of the sheriff is a matter of real concern. The reopening of settled suits, these are real concerns, and yet he accepts this as the rights given to the prosecutors in the process. He just feels that if the jury, having heard both sides of these arguments, having been examined and cross-examined, if fairness is the standard, if reasonable doubt is the standard, he will be acquitted. He professes and finds strength in his declaration of innocence and feels that nothing to the contrary has been found to be to offset that declaration in the course of this long trial. Very last question. Yes, ma'am.
Do you know if he has a plan in place should he be convicted for his kids? Do you know if he has a plan in place for his kids should he be convicted?
No, his plans are for acquittal. You know, in this choice between fear and hope, Michael chooses hope. No doubt he's internalized some fears because of the gravity of the situation, but he's driven forward by hope. He's not paralyzed by fear, and that maybe is the basis for his kind of radiant optimism though cautious throughout this whole process. Thank you very much. I'm going to visit him this afternoon, and I'll have a better sense of where he is as he now awaits day by day the jury to do their duty.
Will you talk to us after that? Here every day?
And that was the Reverend Jesse Jackson, spiritual advisor to the embattled.
For a
14 hours and counting. That's how long the jury in pop star Michael Jackson's case has been deliberating. Today, day 4 of deliberations is set to begin inside the Santa Maria Courthouse. Welcome to Trial Heat and our special report on Michael Jackson's case. I'm Jack Ford. Jamie Floyd has the day off. In just about half an hour, the jury is expected to get back to work, and the anticipation is certainly building outside of the courthouse. Joining us now with the latest to talk about everything that has been taking place, as she has been since the very beginning of this trial, is Court TV's Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, good to see you again, as always.
Morning, Jack.
So, jury's getting back to work in about a half hour or so. The third full day, the fourth day of deliberations. Obviously, we don't know what's going on inside of that jury room, so we can talk about what we do know about, which is what's going on outside of the courtroom. And I've been fascinated from the beginning of this trial about the appearance and the composition of the various groups that have been showing up outside there. What do we have today in terms of people?
You know, it's starting to get eerily quiet around here, if you can believe that, Jack. There are only a handful of fans out there this morning. I do expect that crowd to grow as the day wears on. I guess people are figuring, well, why not sleep in a little bit? The jurors aren't here yet. Michael Jackson doesn't show up anymore because, you know, he used to come around this time, and of course people wanted to get a glimpse of him as he walked into the courthouse. But, you know, yesterday we had a musical bunch of fans. I think I can hear them in my ears, so I think you're seeing the video. People there, you know, just trying to, I guess, raise spirits and have a spirit of community there with the fans. Just here to support Michael Jackson. A couple of days ago we had sort of an impromptu vigil, a prayer service, people just trying to come out here and band together, you know, through this common love for Michael Jackson. And we have, you know, we've got a lot of people out there who really just want to be here. I think they want to be here when the verdict comes in.
Savannah, we had heard tales, if you would, of busloads of supporters that are supposed to be showing up during the course of the jury deliberations. Have we seen any of that so far?
Not busloads. I think there was a van or something from coming up from Los Angeles, the so-called Caravan of Love, but we haven't seen anything on the order of what we saw, for example, at the arraignment, when there really were, I mean, there were just legions of fans. You know, I should also mention that there's kind of a divide now. Some fans come here to the courthouse, but there's a big group of fans at Neverland waiting outside the gates there, hoping to catch a glimpse of Michael Jackson if he comes in and out. And they're very vocal. You know, they're all standing around, and then there's a lot of looky-loo media who come along to see the fans who are waiting to see Michael Jackson. And so people may be there and then come up as the day wears on, come up here and wait out the verdict here at the courthouse.
Savannah, some of our viewers who perhaps have not been plugged into all of this since the deliberation started might be surprised to hear that Michael Jackson himself is not there at the courthouse during the course of the deliberations. Why not, and where is he waiting?
Well, you know, the judge has allowed him to stay at his residence, Neverland, and the reason is, I think, because, number one, with Michael Jackson, it's not like he could just sit around at the courthouse. I mean, it's just a security concern. It's a comfort issue. Who knows how long these deliberations will last? So the judge, I think, as a courtesy to Michael Jackson, has said, I'll give you an hour's notice so that you can wait out the verdict at Neverland, which is a little different than what we had initially heard, that there'd be a much shorter bit of time and that he may have to spend the time, for example, where the defense had some office space, which isn't far from here. So, no, he hasn't been here. He's apparently waiting it out at Neverland and making somewhat frequent trips to the hospital because of some of his recurrent health problems, namely his back, which it seems to really be bothering him lately.
Savannah, I know from the cases that I've covered there on site, as you are here for us during the course of this trial, that there's always a gathering of media, and in many ways it becomes a small and sort of tight-knit community, especially during the course of a longer trial. And that does usually the numbers tend to swell a little bit, especially a high-profile case when you get into the deliberations. Tell us about what we have in terms of our community of media folks out there.
We do. You know, we have the core group who've really been here from day one, and then we have all these new people coming in. So, of course, we think, what are you doing here? But in any event, it's understandable that as the closing arguments began and, of course, waiting for a verdict, the media presence has really swelled here. You just see a lot more producers, a lot more photographers, a lot more reporters, everybody waiting out the verdict. What's really interesting to me is the international presence. You know, we have 32 countries represented here from all continents except for Antarctica. I guess they didn't consider this an important case to cover, but you know, we just have a strong international presence, and that's been interesting too. And you're absolutely right, Jack. This feeling of community does form among the reporters, and we all, you know, love to talk about the case because that's all we think about. That's all we do all day. So then we all go out to dinner at night, and what do we talk about? The case. You know, we're boring people.
You can run, but you can't hide from it, Savannah. His attire in some instances, so that we can talk about how that might be playing into this drama.
Well, you know, I think Michael Jackson more or less comported himself as the model defendant throughout this trial, with one glaring exception, and I think we all know where I'm going with this one, and that would be the day that he didn't show up to court, had to have a warrant out for him, got here about within an hour or so, or else he was going to get thrown in jail, and came in his pajamas. I mean, that obviously stands out in my mind, but, you know, that was one day. We're talking about, what, 65, 66 days of trial, and I think for most of them, Michael Jackson was here on time. He was engaged. He didn't engage in any antics there at the defense table. He'd occasionally write some notes to his lawyer, but was not somebody, you know, one of those clients that's constantly tugging on his lawyer's sleeve. You know, I think he really had a very appropriate presence in that courtroom. Most of the time, he seemed to just stare straight ahead. I'm not even sure in the prosecution case if he ever really looked at those witnesses. It seemed to me a lot of the time he just stared straight ahead. Seemed to be a little bit more engaged. I noticed when it was people from Neverland, or there was talk about, you know, his home or things he knew about. I'd notice him writing notes to his defense attorney, maybe to offer suggestions or to explain things a little bit. But as I say, he seemed to really act appropriately inside that courtroom. You know, he did like to get candy from time to time from the bailiff, but it was nothing like what we saw, for example, in that lawsuit a few years ago, the concert promoter that sued him, and he took the stand and was behaving terribly and had, you know, did the horns thing behind his head. I mean, we have that picture that just looks insane. You know, I had talked to a Reuters reporter who was here for that. I said, why did he do that? You know, what was that? What was happening in the trial when that happened? And he said, nothing. He just started behaving that way on the stand. Well, the Michael Jackson we saw in this trial, in this criminal trial, was nothing like that Michael Jackson.
We're also joined, we have a number of guests here that we're delighted to have with us, and let me start off with them one at a time. Andrew Goldberg, the managing editor of thesmokinggun.com, and Andrew has... Welcome back to our special report on the Michael Jackson trial. The jury is scheduled to resume their deliberations literally momentarily. They've deliberated now for, as you can see, 14 hours and 23 minutes since they began their deliberations for a brief period of time last Friday. As I said, we know that they are back now. Andrew Goldberg told us just a few moments ago that he saw the vans carrying the jurors arrive back at the courthouse, so they should be getting to work any moment now. In the meantime, let's go back out to Savannah Guthrie in Santa Maria, California. Savannah, we were talking before about jurors and expectations and personalities in the courtroom, and it always brings us back to Michael Jackson and his personalities. And I'm curious, we talked in the past, throughout the course of this trial, how the defense probably wants to communicate to these jurors, yes, Michael Jackson is a very different man.
Me too.
You could even call him bizarre if you want to, but that doesn't make him a criminal. How strong was the defense lawyer, Tom Mesereau, in saying that to the jury during the course of his closing argument?
Such a great question, Jack. You know what I think is really interesting about the defense closing argument is Tom Mesereau did not stand up and do what some people thought he should, which is to say to the jurors, look, Michael Jackson is not like you and me, okay? It's not necessarily appropriate for a man to sleep with boys, but you got to understand where he's coming from. He didn't. To me, it seemed like Tom Mesereau was more he embraced Michael Jackson as an eccentric and as an artist and as somebody who's whimsical and climbs trees, and he's not like you and me, but he didn't try to acknowledge or concede any ground in that regard. So that was an interesting strategy call that I thought the defense made. I don't know if it's the right one or the wrong one, but I did think, you know, they're really embracing Michael Jackson. And, you know, even they went as far as to say in a portion of Tom Mesereau's closing argument when he was saying some pretty damning things about the prosecutors in this case, saying, that they were mean-spirited and desperate and all the rest of it. And he said, and you know why they have to dirty him up and make him look bad and embarrass him and humiliate him? Because they're afraid you just might like him. They're afraid you might just admire Michael Jackson, which I thought was a pretty astonishing thing to say, given the state of this trial and some of the state of the evidence, one way or the other. It was very interesting to me. So yes, a strategy call on the part of the defense to fully embrace their client and really not acknowledge any problems, any infirmities in some of the decisions he's made with regard to children.
Sonia, what would you have advised the defense here? Again, as Savannah said, all of us, I think, here at Court TV, when we talked about this, as you so well characterized, talking of him sort of as whimsical and eccentric. How about the prosecution here and the accuser, and maybe more importantly, the accuser's mother? Because as we've seen from the beginning of this case, the accuser's mother is the one who was wearing the bullseye, the target on her, as far as, for the most part, as far as the defense was concerned. How did the prosecution deal with the two of them during the course of closing arguments?
Well, it's interesting because it strikes me that the prosecutors were in a similar situation where they had to make a strategy call about whether or not to embrace the accuser's mother completely or to acknowledge some faults on her behalf. And, they sort of did. For example, in the closing argument, I'm looking at the transcript, Ron Zonen said, okay, did she make a false representation on her welfare application? Okay, yes, she did. But then he was right away sort of said, well, you know what? She's 37 years old, and if this is the only mistake they can come to, they can point out to, that's pretty good. And then he said, she was on her own, she's married at 16, it's an abusive relationship. It seems to me that the prosecutors could have acknowledged more of the accuser's mother's problems. For example, I don't think there's anyone in that courtroom who thought she was being fully truthful talking about that rebuttal video. She told these jurors that every word, every laugh, every giggle, every gesture on that rebuttal video was memorized and scripted word for word. That is something that is just not credible. I try to be objective, Jack, but I don't think there's anybody in that courtroom who thought that was a true statement. And it seemed to me that the prosecutors could have almost acknowledged that or said, you know what, okay, she's got some issues, but, and they did that a little bit, but in many ways I think they too embraced the accuser's mother much the same way the defense chose to embrace Michael Jackson fully and not really acknowledge his faults.
Andrew, what do you think about that, about the defense essentially embracing Michael Jackson and not trying to create?
Well, Tom Mesereau, the defense attorney, is well known, obviously, for his distinctive look, but also for his fierce litigation of cases on behalf of his clients. Our Court TV viewers, of course, remember that he represented Robert Blake in the preliminary hearing and really showed his skills. He kind of pulled a rabbit out of a hat by getting Robert Blake released on bond at the end of that preliminary hearing, something that was very hard to do. He made a creative argument and won the day, and Robert Blake was released from prison, and he got actually one of the counts dropped against Robert Blake before leaving that case. And he's also somebody who every year takes on a pro bono case, something he believes in, and will go and do his services completely for free for a client. So he's kind of an activist lawyer, somebody who, he's one of those do-gooder lawyers. That's how I think of Tom Mesereau. Tom Sneddon is a veteran prosecutor. He has been with the DA's office here 34 years, 24 of those years as the elected district attorney. He has served 6 terms, and we understand this will be his last term. I am told that in his 34 years prosecuting cases, he has lost 4 times. I don't think Tom Mesereau's used to losing either. This was a hotly litigated case. It was clear to me that these lawyers aren't in love with each other, okay? It's not personal, but they really feel strongly about their sides, and it was very enjoyable to watch good lawyering in that courtroom.
Sonia, how much attention do you think jurors pay to the lawyers themselves?
They'd ask you, where do you live? And you'd say Santa Maria. And they'd say, well, where's that? And you'd say, well, do you know where Santa Barbara is? And they'd say, yeah, we know Santa Barbara. We'd say, well, north of Santa Barbara. Now you go to Europe and you say Santa Maria. They say, oh, yeah, the Jackson trial. So the Jackson trial has put Santa Maria on the map.
And isn't that sweet? All right. Well, while the mayor might be happy that the Jackson trial is boosting Santa Maria's popularity, Michael Jackson himself is hoping Santa Maria is a place where a jury is sympathetic to his plight. Good afternoon and welcome to Both Sides in our special coverage of the Michael Jackson trial. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle Newsom.
And I'm Vinny Politan. Yesterday, it was not an unusual scene at the courthouse. Jackson's spokesperson took to the microphone and gave an update on the King of Pop's condition. She also tried to quash rumors that she was speaking without Jackson's defense team's approval.
Tom Mesereau is very furious that you're even here, also furious at Reverend Jackson for showing up. He wants the thing buttoned up and make this as quiet and professional as possible. So why are you here when he, in fact, I'm told,
if Mr.
doesn't want you
Mesereau
out
didn't
there?
want me here, I wouldn't be here, so don't listen to so many rumors.
He's endorsing your presence?
Yes, he is. I never speak to the media without talking to Tom Mesereau because I understand, quite unlike many of you, that this is a serious situation. And so therefore, if I had not spoken to our team, I would not be here, as I have not done in the past.
So she has the blessing of Jackson's defense attorney? Well, not according to Tom Mesereau. He released this statement on Michael Jackson's website yesterday. Quote, "I have not authorized anyone to speak or hold any press conferences on behalf of Michael Jackson or his family. A gag order is in effect, which the defense team will continue to honor." And joining us now with more on this is Court TV correspondent Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, first of all, we've got to go through this and figure out exactly what this all means. But first, can you put in context for us, who is Ramon Bain? How did she get involved with this? And what exactly is her relationship to Michael Jackson, to Thomas Mesereau, to anyone related with the defense team?
Now, and you would think those would be straightforward questions, Vinny, but it's not a simple answer at all. Ramon Bain purports to be Michael Jackson's spokeswoman. She has been here for much of the trial, not all of it, but much of it, listening, and she tends to hold forth at these news conferences at the end of the day, talking about Michael Jackson's feelings and what he does. She has insisted all along that she is in contact with Tom Mesereau, the defense lawyer. She has insisted that she speaks to Michael Jackson, but, you know, on a somewhat regular basis, she seems to not have the most current information. For example, last week, Michael Jackson went to the hospital. Ramon Bain issued a statement saying he's not at the hospital. Turns out, yes, he was. And Dick Gregory, the civil rights activist who's been sort of hanging around Michael Jackson these days, confirmed that he had been at the hospital. So, you know, I tend to feel for Ramon Bain because this is the second example of where she's sort of been embarrassed by people that are supposed to be all on the same team. Apparently, Tom Mesereau does not appreciate her out here holding news conferences in the middle of deliberation and felt this was the only way to send the message through a statement on Michael Jackson's website.
Yeah, this is a crazy situation, so we've got some folks here in New York to help us analyze this case and this issue. Noted criminal defense attorney Michael Hardy. Michael has handled a number of high-profile trials.
Savannah Guthrie, you know, I thought it was supposed to be the Jackson 5, not the Jackson 500. How many people are involved in Team Jackson?
Well, that's the question, and you know, I just wanted to point out, Kimberly, let's take a look at that news conference with Ramon Bain yesterday. I mean, somebody asks her point blank whether Mesereau is disgusted with the idea of all these news conferences, whether he's approving it, whether he wants it to be buttoned down, and she really kind of spanks the reporter and says, you shouldn't listen to all these rumors, and is so strident in her remarks. And I just, in light of what's happened now, in light of an hour later, Tom Mesereau putting out a statement saying, I don't approve Ramon Bain to go in here and do news conferences, it just smells like a setup to me. And you know, you have to wonder if things have deteriorated to the point where Tom Mesereau has to get the message to Ramon Bain in this most humiliating and embarrassing way. I mean, why wouldn't he have just called her and said, look, knock it off, this isn't great for us?
Right, and
I mean, somewhere there's this communication breakdown.
Totally, and look what happened with Brian Oxman too. He kind of got the boot, the heave-ho, so there's a whole lot of spanking going around in Team Jackson, I'll tell you.
It's crazy in Santa Maria. Well, jurors are slowly moving towards a verdict in this case, but that doesn't mean you have to take your time. So run on over to your computer, send us an email at bothsides@courttv.com. Send us your questions, comments, and witty remarks about the case against the King of Pop. Later in the show, we'll be answering some of your email questions live on our show. We'll be right back.
As in just about any case. Talk a little bit about the accuser's role here and give us some guidance on what it is that the jurors may well be focusing on.
Well, it seems to me that if they're asking to hear the accuser's testimony, they're focusing dead center on the molestation allegations in this case. Although it's worth reminding everybody that though there are 4 counts of molestation, only 2 of those counts relate to what the accuser testified to. The other 2 counts relate to what his brother testified to. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to do this readback thing. They may want to hear what the accuser's brother, James Doe, had to say. But in any event, yes, the accuser testified that toward the waning days of his stay at Neverland, Michael Jackson molested him on at least 2 occasions. Here's a little bit more about his testimony.
For the first time since the allegations of child molestation arose, Michael Jackson and his accuser met face-to-face in a court of law. Jackson's accuser took the stand for 4 days of testimony and told the jury about his friendship with the King of Pop. Among the many things he recounted was how they looked at pornography together. He testified, Frank started doing stuff on the internet, and then they started looking up adult material sites. Where was Mr. Jackson there? Answer, yeah. Question, Mr. Jackson was involved in that? Answer, yes. There was this girl with her shirt up, and Michael says, like it was all quiet and stuff, and Michael was like, got milk? And we started laughing because he said that. The boy also testified about how Jackson gave him alcohol when they were together. Question, after Mr. Jackson handed you the can and he told you that it was Jesus juice, what did you do? Answer, I drank a little bit of it and I told him that it tasted ugly. And what did he say? He said that it's okay because it will relax you. Then he spoke about the allegations at the heart of this trial and told the jurors how he says Michael Jackson molested him. Question, at any time while you were at Neverland Ranch, did Mr. Jackson ever touch you inappropriately? Answer, yes. We were under the covers, and I had his pajamas on, and then that's when he put his hand in my pants, and then he started masturbating me. But the boy says it didn't end there. He testified, the same thing happened again. We were laying there, and then he started doing it to me, and then he grabbed my hand in a way to try to do it to him, and I pulled my hand away because I didn't want to do it.
Well, one measure of the importance of this testimony is how long the accuser was on cross-examination. I just looked back at my notes, approximately 7.5 hours over the course of 3 court days. Let's listen to a little bit more about the cross-examination of this important witness.
Inside the courtroom, but she has interviewed scores and scores of jurors after cases to get some of the information that she provides us. Let's bounce back out to Santa Maria, California, to Diane Dimond. Once again, Diane, you have some information, I understand.
Well, I just wanted to get in on your discussion with Sonia because it just rings in my head. Tom Sneddon, I noticed during this 14-week trial, stepped back from quite a bit of the evidence, maybe considering himself to be a lightning rod of criticism. During this whole trial, Tom Mesereau would grandly refer to him as the government prosecutor, you know, kept underscoring that. And so I noticed that Ron Zonen, for example, his assistant, senior assistant DA, took on a lot of the questioning of the young boys, for example. The 1108 testimony, the maid's son, the 2 first defense witnesses who are now young men, but as young boys spent a lot of time at Neverland. And not that Tom Sneddon didn't fully participate in this trial, but when it came down to those tender little moments where, you know, someone might cry in relating what had happened to them or allegedly what happened to them, he left that, he stepped back, and as the team leader left that to Ron Zonen, who is a comforting, very effective, very experienced sex crimes prosecutor.
Well, as Diane said, there are interesting dynamics working out in that courtroom with regard to the prosecutors, but equally interesting dynamics in the courtroom with...
We're live from the Santa Maria Courthouse with the latest. Kathleen Pryor live today at 5, only on Court TV.
This man is a human being. He has a family. He has a mother going in and out of this courtroom every single day, 75-year-old mother. Do you think it's hard for the family? Of course it is. I just wish the media would, you know what, put maybe for a little bit, try to put themselves in Michael Jackson's shoes and the family's shoes.
Well, they might not be putting themselves in his shoes. Reporters from around the world are definitely following Michael Jackson's every move. Welcome back to Both Sides. I'm Vinnie Politan, along with Kimberly Guilfoyle Newsom. Michael Jackson isn't just famous in the United States, he is a huge celebrity all over the world. And over 30 different countries have media representatives in Santa Maria to cover the King of Pop's trial. Here's what some of them had to say about the case.
Michael Jackson is an international figure. I mean, there's no doubt about it. For years, since the Jackson 5, I myself grew up with that kind of music, and I grew up with Michael Jackson, and we saw his evolution and, you know, his ascending to stardom. Michael has a huge support in Europe, in the Spanish country, particularly Spain, and Germany, France, etc.
I think Michael Jackson is a legend. He's an international star, and that's always of interest, you know, wherever you come from, because we know Michael Jackson as a star. He's all moved us with his music. You know, no one can deny the fact that he's a brilliant artist, and the fact that he's involved with this child molestation. Of course, everyone wants to know the outcome. And also from a Canadian perspective, this is really big. We have criminals in Canada, don't take me wrong, but we have no coverage like this. This is bigger than life.
Michael Jackson is a living legend. I think everyone would agree that he's one of the greatest musicians of our times, no matter if you like him or not. So there is an interest in Germany because he was or is as popular there as he is here. I think the public opinion is a bit against Michael Jackson because everyone basically thinks there must be something wrong with that fixation on young boys. So I think the public opinion is a bit against him in Germany.
All right, Peter Chaplin is still with us, the media coordinator, and your phone went off. Tara Borelli, a man who's on high alert himself out there, CBS News consultant. Peter Chaplin meeting with the attorneys. What are you reading into it, if anything?
You know, I'm a big fan of Peter Chaplin's. I think everybody who's been out here for the last, 6 months or so really, admires Peter. And he is the man that we go to, as Diane said, for any little crumb of any information. I don't know what his presence there means at that meeting. You know, as Diane said, it could mean nothing at all. But I agree with Kimberly. You know, I mean, I'm on the edge of my seat out here. I mean, the anxiety out here is great. We really want a verdict. And, we're looking for any kind of little indication that might lead us in that direction. But I'm going to wait and see what it means. After I leave here, I'm going to be making a beeline to Peter's tent to find out what's going on.
Oh, I bet you everybody's going to be swarming around that tent. Poor Peter. But I think we'll know perhaps what the result of that meeting or consultation was with the court hopefully soon. Ken Montgomery, what do you make of this, the fact that the pool coordinator is in there with the attorneys and the judge?
I mean, I guess
area and the media tent here, then fans out on the street. There are probably more than 100 people have gathered, but they're not all Michael Jackson fans. Some of them are religious representatives that shout at the Michael Jackson fans, shame, shame, idolatry is a sin, and back and forth. And they really they had to be separated at one point today, I'm told, because it does get a little heated. It's also getting hot out here, I must tell you, and that is going to add, it could add to some tempers flaring. So the police presence, the security presence around the courthouse has doubled recently. Both Santa Maria Police Department, which patrol out there on the street, and the court, the Sheriff's Department security, it's increased at least double. So they're really they're on the job. They're watching things and they're trying to diffuse them as they start.
Okay, well, we see there in the background, of course, a lot of religious protesters. Let's go to Ken Montgomery before we have to say goodbye to him, criminal defense attorney. A lot going on there. It seems many people using this to their advantage to try and get their message out, whatever that might be. War protesters, religious protesters. Do you think this will have any impact on the jury that is not sequestered?
I think if you're a resident of that town and you're not really a Michael Jackson fan, yeah, this may rub you the wrong way, but ultimately I think the jurors are focused on the testimony that went in, and they're not paying attention for the most part to this stuff until it's time for them to leave or time for them to arrive.
Could they?
Captain Eugene Cassar is reporting from Philadelphia. We're going to go back to the studio with Nancy Grace. We've got a development in the Michael Jackson case. Nancy?
You darn right, there's a development straight out to the courthouse. Savannah Guthrie?
Hi, I have to tell you, Nancy, this is not confirmed. There is a report that there's a verdict. There's a couple of news agencies reporting it. I don't have it officially yet, but I have to tell you, there is suddenly a lot of activity, a lot of running. People are reporting it. We're not reporting it officially, but I have to tell you, those reports are being made right now from a couple of networks.
Straight to Ann Bremner. So all of our speculation regarding what's going on behind Chambers doors is correct. They were talking
That's right.
about speeding this jury along. Wait, back to Savannah. Savannah?
I just want to let you know our pool coordinator is about to hold a news conference, so I just wanted you to know we may hear this word officially any moment now.
And as soon as we do, we will be taking you there to find out the latest. Apparently, there is a verdict in the Michael Jackson child molestation trial. Back to Ann Bremner, it seems to me as if the jury answered all of its own questions there at the end. They had sent out that question, then they withdrew it before the lawyers could come up with an answer.
Yeah, you know, I kept saying last week and today the end is near. I'm not just talking about those signs out front with some of the people are carrying. It sounds like they had some issue at the very end and then withdrew that. So verdict means verdict. And so I don't think we've got a mistrial on some unless they had the judge come in and explain you can mistry some and have a verdict on others. We have verdicts, Nancy, I think, whatever they are. We've got a verdicts on all 10 counts.
And to Art Harris, speculation?
Art's missing.
Okay, somehow I have lost Art Harris. His satellite is down. So, Savannah, describe the scene at the courthouse for us.
Pandemonium. Well, during the news break, people started running. I started hearing the fans screaming very loudly. We knew something was happening. I saw people running this way. Then Diane Dimond came running my way, telling me what some of the other networks are reporting. But as I say, it hasn't been made official yet. We do expect Peter Shapland, who is the pool coordinator, he speaks to the media and for the court on some occasions to make a statement. But I can tell you the energy level has just shot. The verdict has been reached. Peter Shapland just confirmed it. So yes, it is. And the hour clock, he just walked by me. So yes, a verdict has been reached in the Michael Jackson case.
Back to Ann Bremner. Ann Bremner, go ahead, go out on a limb. How long were they in deliberations, and what do you think this last chain of events meant?
I think, you know, what we've had now is, you know, Friday 2 hours and then most of last week, but again 2 hours on Thursday because of the graduations here in Santa Maria. And then today, just this morning, I think, Nancy, that they wanted to hear readbacks and they went through and they had some kind of a question on one of the counts. They resolved it themselves and they're ready to render their verdicts. I mean, verdicts. Because I don't found a mistrial. I think we'd hear something additionally or they'd wait longer to try and resolve this.
Straight back to Savannah.
And it's pandemonium. It's
Nancy.
Okay.
Nancy, sorry to be impolite, but I wanted to let you know that the verdict will be read at 1:30. That's an hour from now, 1:30. That's 4:30 Eastern.
The verdict will be read 4:30 Eastern, everyone. Savannah Guthrie reporting from the courthouse. A verdict in the Michael Jackson child molestation trial has been handed down. Right now, that jury is still in the jury deliberation room. They will file into the courtroom and announce the verdict. My big question is, do you think Michael Jackson can get there in an hour and a half, Savannah?
I'm sorry, Nancy. People are talking to me. Will you repeat it? I'm sorry.
Sure. Do you think Jackson can get there in an hour and a half?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're looking at, if it's really going to be 1:30, we're talking about less than an hour, but I've driven it myself. It's about 40 minutes, and I've seen those SUVs drive it, and they hightail it. So I would expect them to be reaching high speeds if indeed there is a verdict, as Peter Shapland, the pool coordinator, has just reported to us.
Very quickly to David Schwartz. David, you've tried a lot of felony cases. What will the procedure be if there is a conviction in court today? Uh-oh, we've lost Schwartz, everybody. We're gearing up our satellites to go back to Santa Maria. Savannah Guthrie, what will the procedure be if we get a guilty verdict today?
Okay, if we get a guilty verdict today, the judge will have a decision whether to take Michael Jackson directly into custody. He could indeed walk up to the courthouse and never walk back outside of this courthouse, but it will be up to the judge. I expect that if there were a guilty verdict, the defense, of course, would ask that he be allowed out pending the sentencing date, but I'm not clear that the judge would do that. He would then be taken to either Santa Maria Jail or Santa Barbara County Jail, where he would spend the next 30 or so days. The judge would then set a sentencing date for about 3 weeks, 4 weeks in advance. During that time, a pre-sentence investigation would take place, after which he would sentence Michael Jackson, and he would then be in the custody of the Department of Corrections. That is if there were a guilty verdict. Again, I have to repeat, the verdict expected in about less than 1 hour, 1:30 local time. That's 4:30.
And very quickly to Ann Bremner, what will happen if there is an acquittal or a hung jury?
Well, that he's free to go. And you know, we have pandemonium already all around me, Nancy. I'm back behind the courthouse. It's going nuts. I'm zany out here. So with an acquittal, of course, we'll have quite the reaction from the fans and everyone out front. That, you know, that pressure with them is building every day with all their signs and everything else. But an acquittal, he's free to go. That's it. He walks out the door. He can go to Neverland. He can go to France. He can do whatever he wants. Hung jury, Tom Sneddon's choice to retry Michael Jackson. Doesn't matter if it's 11-1 to convict, 11-1 to acquit. He can retry this, probably 60 days, have it refiled. Same judge, Judge Melville, different jury. And a retrial.
And finally, to Dr. Patricia Saunders, final thoughts, Doctor?
I think we can expect to see some considerable drama from Mr. Jackson either way.
Straight back out to Diane Dimond. Diane, jury verdict. What's your take?
Yeah, I didn't believe it at first, Nancy, because we hadn't heard it officially from the court. But Peter Chaplin, our pool coordinator, has confirmed it at about 12:30 local time here, 3:30 your time. The jury did reach a verdict in the Michael Jackson case. We're waiting to hear in less than 1 hour now. We will be escorted into the courtroom. I'll be inside there. Savannah Guthrie will stay out here to give you all of the latest information, so stay with Court TV. Again, by the bottom of this hour, we should know whether Michael Jackson is